Welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of Fresh Corduroy. I'm your host, Craig Zolan. Today's episode is with Sophie Goldschmidt, the CEO of US Ski and Snowboard. Sophie joins us and talks about what it's like managing a national governing body that covers multiple sports across skiing and snowboarding, what she brings to the table given her background in sports management, the upcoming Olympic cycle and what that means for the organization, and of course, grassroots development and how that shapes the organization. Before we dive into the episode, please follow or like and subscribe to the episode wherever you listen to podcasts. And with that, let's dive into Fresh Corduroy with Sophie Goldschmidt. Okay, welcome to another episode of Fresh Corduroy. Today's guest is Sophie Goldschmidt, CEO of US Ski and Snowboard. Sophie, welcome to Fresh Corduroy.
Thank you. Delighted to be with you.
Great to have you here. This is the first and inaugural episode of the new season. Took a little hiatus over the summer, but wanted to launch in and hear a few things about the state of affairs at US Ski and Snowboard and where we see the organization going in the coming year and years, for that matter. But let's start with the Sophie Goldschmidt skiing origin story. Where and when did you get started skiing?
I started skiing when I was about 11 or 12. My first trip was on a junior high school trip to the Alps, to Austria. And I remember freezing my butt off, but really enjoying it. Was there with a group of friends and the first time sort of experiencing something like that. I actually had been to the Alps in the summer, was familiar with sort of big mountains like that, which are a lot bigger than what you get back in the UK where I grew up. But that was my sort of first experience and memory of skiing for the first time.
And did you carry on? I know you were a competitive tennis player through your youth, but did you continue skiing through your youth and
I did.
into adulthood?
I skied up until sort of my early mid-teens. And then, as you mentioned, I got really into tennis. And so I wasn't really allowed to ski, because all my holidays were spent playing tennis tournaments and training. And there was always a little bit of a worry about injury as well. So I actually then took quite a break and got back into it later on in life. And now I live here in Park City. So I have no excuse but to ski fairly regularly during the season, although I have a lot of travel during the winter months, unfortunately, as well. But I get out there whenever I can. It's sort of my favourite pastime, favourite thing to do when I have a bit of free time.
Yeah, it is an enjoyable pastime, and I'm sure we'll touch on the fact that it's a lifelong sport and one that one can participate in both in their youth and in a competitive sense and just later in life with the family. So I'm curious, you've been with US Ski and Snowboard now through 4 winter seasons. This will be your 5th, if I counted correctly. How are things going? What's the current state of affairs with US Ski and Snowboard?
Really pleased with where we're at. I started right before the Beijing Olympics, so sort of in the midst of COVID and looking at it. So I've been here sort of 3.5, coming on 4 years. And I think a lot has changed for the most part, really positively. Look, there's always a few twists and turns and certainly don't claim to have got everything right. But I think both on and off the snow, I'm really proud of the improvements that we've made. Both from a business standpoint and sort of on the sporting side as well.
And how would you define the mission or the vision statement for US Ski and Snowboard now?
Yeah, well, as sort of a national governing body, which is what we call ourselves, an NGB, our mission is to engage as many people as possible in our sports, in skiing and snowboarding. And we do this to help champion our sports and ultimately to then deliver US champions with a goal of ultimately one day being the best in the world. And there's all sorts of different areas that impact that, whether it's on the business side, as I would call it, from a marketing and promotional standpoint, the type of broadcast exposure we get. the different partnerships we do with commercial organizations that help invest in us, but also use us as marketing assets to help sort of spread the word. So that's a really important aspect of sort of just growing our sports and the profile of our athletes. And then, on the sports side itself, making sure that we're building the best high-performing positive culture that we can to help our athletes achieve their dreams, because the better they do, the more they can inspire the nation and the next generation to want to participate, and hopefully a few more of them, wanting to make it a career and try and become a professional snow sport athlete. So for me, it's a very virtuous circle. The bigger the base at a grassroots level, the more likely you are to get more talent in the funnel, which ultimately leads to greater success. And that success then sort of invigorates and helps to really turbocharge that base and the participation levels.
You come from a sports management background or a sports business background. I think past leadership at U.S. Ski and Snowboard has been, derived from the skiing base, particularly the ski racing base. How has your experience in sports, business and sports management impacted the direction and sort of the evolution of the organization that it may not have otherwise done if it weren't for you taking the reins?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of look at it in two ways. I think, look, I've been fortunate in my career to work for some fantastic organizations with athletes, with teams, with a wide variety of sports, some emerging, some very established. As you say, mainly focused on the business side. They're always at the intersection of athletes and teams, so have a lot of experience of building those relationships and how we can kind of optimize a partnership with those really important groups. I think coming into this role, many things were working very well at the organization, but on the sort of commercial marketing side, they were looking for someone who was going to try and transform to really take things to the next level and help us really grow in those areas. And that brings some innovation. And I think I've also been in roles several times where I haven't participated or come from those sports. And I think at first, early on, I thought, that was quite daunting. And did that mean that I was at a bit of a disadvantage because I wasn't an insider? I think actually the opposite is true. I think if you've got enough relevant experience, which I feel I have, I've been in the situations that I'm in on a regular basis in this role many times before. They're always nuanced slightly differently, different personalities, slightly different timeline, etc. But that experience is incredibly beneficial because I can look back at what worked, what didn't work, how to sort of manage these different situations. So I think that's super helpful. But I think the fact that I'm coming in almost as an independent with a clean slate, I don't have any preconceived ideas, I don't have any set allegiances or political kind of affiliations with certain stakeholders. I think it allows me to be very objective. And I think it's actually meant that people have just given me a fair crack, maybe more so than if I'd come in as an insider. And I've now experienced that in a couple of other roles as well. And I think often everyone just focuses on the differences between, even within our sort of 10 sports, but certainly between our sports and other sort of sports. And actually, there are so many more commonalities and learnings than there are differences. Yes, of course, technically, an alpine downhiller is different to a mogul skier or a half-pipe snowboarder. But the mental preparation, the physicality, the determination, the highs and lows, how you recover from wins and losses, which is such a big part of these sports, are so similar. And so I've actually really tried to emphasize the similarities and how we can learn more. I was surprised we weren't looking to learn more from others. We were very kind of insular and just in our little box. And I think we were missing a bit of a trick. So both on the business side and on the sports side, I love to borrow great ideas. And I'm a very curious person. Actually, I get more curious the older I get, which is hopefully a good thing. I know I annoy some people maybe with how many questions I ask. But I think that's also really, really helped me in this role. As you grow as a leader, and I'll be growing forever, trying to develop and get better, but you become more comfortable and confident in admitting what you know and what you don't know. And then you complement yourself with the gaps that you need filled. And we've got some amazing people around me, much better qualified in various areas to really help make sure that we've got the full picture and all the pieces of the puzzle, hopefully tracking in the right direction to achieve our goals.
I mean, there are a number of things that I'd love to pull on the thread there. The fact that you talk about asking a lot of questions is near and dear to my own heart. In my professional career, more more frequently than not, whenever I'd have a meeting, I'd ask the first 25 minutes of the 30-minute meeting questions in order to really get at the heart of the matter before moving on with sort of the plan, how to proceed. And I think it takes a little bit of confidence, right? And you don't know things, and it's okay to not know things. But you touched on the breadth of the program, right? 10 different sports. Previously, perhaps working in silos. How do you bring them together? And I'm thinking of this in some respects in a marketing lens, which is you want to build a popularity of snow sports and skiing, sort of the 10 sports in general. I imagine you have a bit of a challenge on your hand in terms of building the popularity when you have discrete products, if you will. If I look at your golf experience, the PGA or the European PGA, there's one product. It's basically 18 holes over 4 days. 18 holes 4 days in a row is the product, right? And you watch the players. Tennis, there's a tournament with a match, etc. And that they convey and they are unified in a lot of respects. 10 different sports is challenging, at least from my mind. I don't know if it is for you as well, but I'd love to hear how you are thinking about those 10 different sports and their individual characteristics, as well as bringing them all to market in a commercial sense and building, again, the popularity of skiing writ large.
Yeah, it's a great question. And sort of strategically, we look at it two ways. We're very proud and we really try to instill this one team mindset across all of our 240 athletes in 10 different sports. Having said that, what each team needs is slightly different, and certainly what each individual athlete needs is certainly very different. So we have this team approach which is unique and specific for each individual. But I actually see it as a real benefit that we have all these different sports because they all have a slightly different tone and personality. They can all learn from each other. From a fan perspective, there's a lot of overlap as well. You often hear of many people doing more than one sort of discipline within skiing or snowboarding. And I think that's sort of the creativity and adventure side of what our sports are always looking for and almost what they're all about. So, look, it does make it quite complex to manage, but you have, within each of our teams, we have a sport director, a leader that defines the plan, working with our chief of sport and ultimately with me as well. And they all look different. How we look at development, the camps and prep period for the elite team. So again, learnings, but they are specific and bespoke to each team. And then within that, each athlete has their own individual professional development plan on and off the snow. And it takes that sort of focus and that attention to detail to really optimize someone's potential. But yeah, look, it takes work, but I see it as an advantage and an opportunity, quite frankly. As long as you've got the resources to put the right infrastructure in place, then I think we're proving that it can work quite well.
And does it matter from a sponsor perspective in terms of the distinct sports involved, or are you selling effectively the entire package and the breadth?
It varies a little bit by partner. They all have different business objectives and therefore are looking for slightly different things, but the vast majority want to be involved with all of our sports. Occasionally, you get someone that's very focused on a specific area, but even if it's a specific area, it's very rarely one team. It's a group of teams, like the ski teams or the snowboard teams. But more and more, they want those different sort of flavors, if I can put it that way. And these teams represent, a slightly different type of image and connectivity with fans as well. So for me, again, from a brand, it's a really a significant opportunity because you can reach a much broader audience than you might do with just a single sport.
And I've heard you talk about the various demographics, but broadly speaking, skiing, snow sports, whether snowboarding or skiing at an alpine resort, appeals to a well-to-do demographic, similar to golf, similar to tennis. How do you sort of activate that for the brands, the partners, and tap into that pool, that potential audience base for again, I understand you want to grow revenue for the organization, which will help performance, which will help grow the base, et cetera, that virtuous cycle that you talked about earlier. How do you tap into that demographic across the different teams or flavors that, as you described?
Yeah, well, I would say, and I've been pleasantly surprised. I'd done my research before I took on this role, but actually the size of our TAM, if we sort of talk about it in business speak, total addressable market, and just those that ski and snowboard on an annual basis is north of 20 million, which is a significant number. That's comparable to the number that plays tennis and golf. So these sports are much bigger than people imagine, brands included, which is why, we have, I think, a lot of positive conversations that go better than I might necessarily expect going into them, because still, a lot of the world and sort of marketing decision makers aren't very educated on kind of the potential of these sports. And that's our job. That's sort of woe on us. So now we're getting our story out there. People are understanding the metrics. We've got more athletes sort of rising to be world champions and the best at what they do. And then within that, you sort of segment it. But look, we've got a lot to play with, and the audience is growing, not just those participating, but also because of the improvements we made to our broadcast distribution. And I think our content is getting better and better from a social perspective. That crossover into lifestyle, whether you participate or not, who wouldn't want to be in some of our just amazing locations, some of the most, beautiful destinations in the world, enjoying après or some snowshoeing, even if you're maybe not getting on the mountain. So, we look at it very holistically. And we work closely with our resorts. Look, and it's no secret, skiing and snowboarding can be expensive at some resorts. It's more affordable at others. There are different programs, onboarding programs to get folks engaged. For example, here in Utah, there's an amazing program for high school, junior high kids, where they can pay very little to be able to ski for the season. And then actually these passes, if you ski a decent amount now, the Epic and Icon Pass work really well. Actually the per day cost, comes down significantly if you're organised and buy those in time. So I think there are different products, and I think as an industry, we're quite mindful of wanting to make it, as affordable as we can, knowing that there are some barriers, the infrastructure, the lifts, etc., take significant investment, which we're not responsible for. So we're, dependent on the resorts and others to put the best model in place so that it's a business they want to be in, but we're also attracting as many participants as we can.
And where is US Ski and Snowboard's, place in that broader ecosystem that you're talking about, with the resort owners, both large and small, the Vail Resorts and the Alteras of the world, plus the small local molehill that has 3 trails. Where does US Ski and Snowboard fit into that broader ecosystem in terms of, growing the pie for everybody?
Yeah, well, as a national governing body, in theory, we sort of sit at the top overseeing the entirety of what makes up our
But there's
sport.
also like the National Ski Association of America, and
Yep.
There's obviously the big for-profit entities, which so you're, yes, as a national governing body of the competitive side, I guess, of the sport, is one facet of a much larger industry, I think. So I'm just trying to, where
Yeah.
do you see yourself fit into that bigger industry, and how do you work collaboratively with everybody?
Yeah, so I would say, so we're not just the national governing body for the competitive side, it's actually the whole ecosystem. So even the grassroots side, the sanctioning of coaches, volunteers, putting on all those grassroots events that engage athletes or non-athletes, if you put it just as a recreational skier and snowboarder for the first time. So it's much broader than just the competitive side. That's what gets the attention, and because it's a significant investment to allow athletes to achieve their dreams. That's where a lot of our funding goes. But we actually have a broader remit, and we have a lot of staff that focus on the grassroots and club side as well. But to answer the other part of your question, I mean, we see the resort partners, whether it's the bigger groups like Altera and Vale, or the smaller independent mountains like Waterville and others. They're all partners. I mean, they are vital to us. We can't do what we do without them. And hopefully we help inspire participation that ultimately helps them succeed and grow in their own right as well. So, when I started, I felt very strongly anyone that's helping our sports and athletes in any way, and athletes with a capital A, again, from a Michaela Schifrin down to a beginner, any one that's helping them to have a great experience and get involved, we should be thanking. I want them to feel part of our organisation, because for sure they're part of ours. And having that much more inclusive environment, it doesn't mean that we can write a check to everyone. Unfortunately, I wish we could. We have finite resources, and as a not-for-profit, everything goes back into our sports and programs. But they are vital partners. Without them, we can't do what we do. The resorts in particular that host events for us, those events cost a significant amount of money to put on. We help to fund them through our sponsor partners, broadcasters, etc. But there's still a significant investment from each one of those resorts that enables those events to happen. So we're very grateful for them, and we're quite reliant on them for a big part of what we do.
And as a nonprofit and a national governing body, I imagine it both has some advantages and disadvantages. If you were to compare yourselves to the WTA or the PGA, or the professional leagues or associations that cover professional sport, who could go out and get financing and raise money. I don't know that they necessarily have capex, but I haven't been in the business side of things, but it's ultimately the teams that are building stadiums. So I don't know what the PGA's costs are, but for instance, but being a nonprofit, advantages or disadvantages in that context. I know a large component of your revenue comes from philanthropy, charitable donations, which is not something that the PGA is going out and asking for, I don't think. So there might be an upside there, but expand on what the pros and cons are.
Yeah, so I guess the two main differences, I mean, us compared to a PGA or an NFL or whoever it might be, like I mentioned, we have oversight for this whole sport from professional right down to grassroots, whereas they're focused more narrowly just on the elite professional side. And then the second, like you say, is from a funding perspective. Being a 501c3, philanthropy is quite a significant part of our revenue. It's about 25-30%, depending on the year. Thank goodness, because we get zero government funding, which most of our competitors outside of the US, even in Canada and certainly in all of Europe, 40 to 50% of their funding comes from the government. So the philanthropic aspect and mindset of the US is amazing, and that helps us kind of fill that gap. Outside of that, actually, I think our mindset and how we operate, I want it to be very similar to a PGA or an NFL. Not saying we're close to them yet, but we want to be very commercially minded. Generating revenue, making as much money as we can is a good thing. It means we can support more of the programming for our sports and athletes. The beauty is, and what I'm so proud of, it's not making other people rich and owners rich and what have you. It's helping to support our sports, which is an amazing mission to have. And I think when we're out there pitching different partners, they also love that too. They see it's not just a branding exercise, but they're actually making a difference in people's lives and giving back to a sport. So I think that's actually a really powerful differentiator. But how we operate on a daily basis, I want to be very similar. We want to be incredibly professional, high performing, and really ambitious with what we think we can achieve. As far as, CapEx and setting up different investment vehicles, our core business sort of does what it says on the tin, but it doesn't mean we can't set up other sort of joint venture initiatives or partner with others. Like we have a partnership with the X Games, which is definitely a for-profit organisation, and you can structure that in such a way that that can be beneficial for them and us. And there are other business opportunities that we're looking at where we may take on outside investment or someone else that's willing to take the risk, and then we have a share of the upside. Our upside just goes into our not-for-profit, theirs goes into their structure. So I actually think we have the opportunity to be as entrepreneurial as anyone, which I love about this role, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not lacking for opportunity.
No, certainly not.
You touched on it before. Broadcast rights is historically, at least for Alpine. I don't know how it is for the other sports, but I imagine it's very similar. The broadcast rights have been discombobulated, for lack of a better term, in the sense that it's about multiple providers, whether it was online streaming by a very confusingly similar name, US Ski and Snowboard Live, I think, right? Or Peacock.
No US, just Ski and Snowboard Live. But yes, it is confusing.
Yeah, Ski and Snowboard Live, NBC, Outside have all been broadcast partners for one type of event or another. I oftentimes would get a text from a friend early in the morning saying, how can I watch, X race today? Because it wasn't clear. Is that being simplified and streamlined in the coming season and years in the future?
Yeah, so we've made sort of improvements with every year that I've been here. We're making a significant step the season after this, so for the 26-27 season. So something I've spent a lot of time on over the last couple of years is working with FIS and our European counterparts to try and centralise our rights, so that in the US we're representing both our domestic events and the European events, so we can bundle them together. That's not the case at the moment. So we actually have really no control over where the European rights sit, hence Ski and Snowboard .live and various other platforms that are housing those. I think you'll find that we've actually done a much better job with our domestic rights through our partners Outside and then the NBC family of channels. But now that will be further sort of aggregated and simplified post this season. So that was a big strategic step for us that, took a lot of time because there are existing deals in place and every country works slightly differently. But yeah, really pleased we got there in the end. And I think for the fan, the experience is only going to be smoother and simpler going forward. But it will still take some time for certain deals to come up and become fully sort of part of that offering. But definitely heading in the right direction.
And a few things. One, is that a cover across the different sports?
Yes.
And I presume that if you have the broadcast rights across, both domestic and international events, that I'm sure there's a partnership, some sort of a relationship or deal cut with FIS, but the revenue associated with those broadcast rights will inure to the benefit of US Ski and Snowboard.
Correct. I mean, a portion of it goes back to those that have given us the rights.
Yeah.
So, but the goal is that by aggregating, the overall value goes up. So that should benefit everyone that's part of that new package.
Good. I'm sure there'll be many listeners that'll be pleased to hear that simplicity will be in the not too distant future. In talking about broadcast, and I know you've mentioned it before, others have talked about raising the profile of the sport or the sports, and there's plenty of drama. I had this conversation with someone last season on the podcast about, and she used to be in communications for FIS and talk about the drama, the things off the hill, and said there should be more attention paid to that in the sense that it's a compelling story, and we talked about Drive to Survive and the other Netflix shows, Point Break, and whatever the tennis one was, and full swing, the golf one. So, is there something in the works in that vein to again enhance the popularity of the sports through storytelling?
Yeah, we've implemented a few things over the past couple of seasons. So the Stiefel Snow Show, which has been airing every weekend during the season, which gives a recap of the competitive results from the prior weekend, but also is showcasing the different personalities and stories behind the athletes, etc. So I think that's been a really positive step, has been reviewed very well, and we see the audiences growing on that every season. We'll be rolling that out again this season. We also launched a series with Together, which is a female-focused women's sports platform. They did a behind-the-scenes look at our up-and-coming snowboard team. And then different features, both with our broadcast partners here and internationally. And we're currently in the process of actually finalising 2, hopefully 3, new docuseries along the lines of Drive to Survive, covering a variety of sports. Look, as you noted, it's been quite saturated the last few years with these docuseries, and so finding the right angle and pitch was really key. I mean, we have amazing stories to tell, and even still, just educating the audiences on just how dangerous these sports are. Unfortunately, sort of drama and danger and the risk reward of going, almost 100 miles an hour down a mountain on sheet ice, pretty much. That draws attention, that draws new audiences in, and I think we've still got a ways to go in storytelling that better and really bringing that drama to life. But we've got several projects in the works, and I'm excited about what we're going to have on the slate this season.
Yeah, it's not lacking for stories, whether it's alpine racing or moguls or freestyle. Someone skiing down a moguls course and then pulling a backflip, to me, who can't pull a backflip, is interesting and exciting, and or the free skiers, and then there's I don't want to cast them aside, but the cross country team is different in the sense that it's not going downhill. I'm comparing them different than snowboarders and skiers, but it's much more of an endurance sport, and has a different appeal. I mean, triathlon, cycling, running, all very popular. It's in the same vein as those sorts of activities in a lot of respects, with, I guess, the added fun of being on a very slippery surface, and the potential for falls and crashes along the way. So, like, how do you, include them in the mix of things, and each one has a unique story to tell.
Well, the 3 projects I will mention, they're all focused on different sports. So we definitely are looking at the breadth of our sports and athletes, and they all are positioned slightly differently. The way the team dynamics work, for instance, cross country, the men and women travel together. Alpine is very, separate. Some of them have very long seasons. Some of them have quite a few gaps where they go off and do their filming and go back country. And so there's so many different elements to bring to life. We're certainly not short of stories. It's how can you pull those together in the most compelling way that can cut through to new audiences and new types of organizations. These production companies and streamers aren't familiar with what we necessarily have to offer. But I think, the word is getting out there, and we're definitely getting more interest, and now even inbound calls too, with people that want to partner with us around some of these different storytelling opportunities.
That's great. Shifting gears a little bit into, call it, athlete development and support. I mean, you talked about, obviously, you're managing the organization, from the grassroots level up to the top. Let's talk about the role of U.S. Ski and Snowboard. How do you foster the wide end of the funnel, which is the grassroots, 8-year-old skier, whether they be cross country, alpine, moguls, what have you. How do you develop the wide end of the funnel to improve performance at the top level down the road?
So on a day-to-day basis, we're really quite reliant on our clubs and the different academies to create that experience. What we do is sort of the layer around it, the infrastructure, the coaches' development, the training courses, to make sure they're getting taught the right way to hopefully make it a great experience and engaging, so that they get enjoyment. The athletes, attempting these sports for the first time, feel that they're improving, and then all of the other sort of administrative side, which is significant. So whether it's the safeguarding aspects of the sport, or actually all of the different competitive schedules, etc. So we have various different departments that are working at that level, but hand in glove with the clubs and academies, because we only have about 200 people across our organisation, and that includes managing the elite team as well. So we work with all of those different outlets, which are super important to us. But over time, we want to complement that with more support, even more coaching and education opportunities, more camps for those up and comers. And we're actually just working on a new endowment at the moment, where for the first time we'll have ring-fenced amount of budget set aside to invest in earlier stage development. Look, how people define development is almost how long is a piece of string. At the moment, you qualify for our teams when you're already very good. You're really out of juniors. You're already sort of on that professional World Cup pathway, at least probably doing NORAMs, etc. But we want to start earlier in the funnel. We're not going to be able to afford to go right the way down at this stage, maybe in years to come. But the earlier that we can start having even more of an impact, but again, complementing what's already happening. There are some fantastic clubs and coaches and academies and coaches out there. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we do collectively need to up our game and provide more competitive and really elite training opportunities at an earlier age for these athletes that show the promise and have real talent and potential.
Yeah, it might look. As I said, I think before we began, I grew up ski racing, raced through college. I have a son who raced, through FIS. So know the pathway pretty well, I guess. And it's remarkable the difference in, I said, language or skill sets across the breadth of the clubs and the various programs. And I think one of the initiatives, at least here in the East, has been to, again, direct more resources to coaches' education, to having a common language and common framework that coaches can sort of abide by, best practices, etc. But I always think you can improve. And the question is like, and I know since you took office, you've installed a director of sport who oversees everything, and then I imagine there are sport-specific directors who lead the coach's curriculum. How does that work in terms of both centralizing all of that and then farming it out effectively to the regions, and then beyond that the clubs and other programs that are working directly with the athletes?
Yeah. So, we've made quite a few sort of changes over the last few years to sort of further complement that and make sure it's as efficient as possible, along with just really improving our communication and the regularity of it. So whether it's our club town halls or different training sessions we have now, not just at Congress, but kind of throughout the year. I join a quarterly call with all our clubs just to engage on certain topics, but then at the educational level, there's all sorts of programming happening. Bringing the different pockets and different kind of layers in the development pathway together. So Dave McCann oversees our education area. He's been with us for about 18 months, and he has a small team of people in the office, but to your point, there are people in every region working directly with the clubs, with the schools, with all sorts of different kind of stakeholders on how we can better support what they're doing, making sure that, that continuing education, because the sports are evolving so quickly. We want to share what our elite coaches are doing, move that down sort of throughout the system as quickly as possible. And we're actually now beginning to invest more in those regional programs than we ever have before. That the endowment campaign that I mentioned, the new one we're launching, will also support more investment there. And an example of that would be at our alpine level. So we actually got rid of the development team because the reality was it was a significant budget, but actually focusing on quite a few athletes. And a lot of athletes come straight through the system up to the C team. It's quite hard to choose at that age who's really going to pop through. There's still quite a big group, and we felt we wanted to help more for longer. So that budget has now been sort of distributed through a regional program. So we have someone that oversees that new regional development program, and then we have a leader in each region working with the best young men and women, but hand in hand with their clubs and academies to complement what they're doing, which ultimately means our resources can go further. It's early stages, so we'll see how it works, but actually I think for the most part we've got off to a really good start. But it does come back to, communication and making sure that we're complementing what's already in place, but then bringing together those elite sort of up and coming athletes more regularly. But they don't need to be full time with us. You can leave them in their different regions and clubs for longer and bring them together at key moments, make sure they've got the funding to go to the key events and races, the world championships, etc., as needed. So that's our approach there, and we'll be doing more of that across our other sports as well.
I was going to ask you that question. Are you speaking solely about alpine racing, or is that approach being taken across the breadth of the different sports?
So the investment in development is taking place across every sport. It looks different within every sport. We've started with alpine because we kind of had a need and opportunity based on how the development team was already operating. But it's a relevant and effective version is going to happen within every sport. And we've already begun to invest in more coaches centrally and then ultimately in the regions across all of our sports at that development.
I just noticed that you're wearing a US Open sweatshirt or t-shirt. And
with a cool slogan, pressure is privilege. My favorite Billie Jean King.
Billie Jean, yes. So I imagine you went this year. I did as well. And it's coming back to more of the business aspect, but as I was preparing for this and thinking about your background in these other sports organizations, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a US Open of skiing where it's male and female from multiple disciplines over a span of time, not measured in, Killington's 2 days, Birds of Prey is maybe, 3 competition days typically, with training, they're much smaller in terms of duration. I would imagine, I know there are some difficulties with this, but the thought came into mind, wouldn't it be amazing if there were something like the US Open for skiing where it's a week-long, I don't think we could do 2 weeks, but, a week-long event showcasing the best in the world at these various sports. And I imagine there'd be, tons of, various community engage, and marketing engagement activity. Like I'm just, spitballing here with you, but is that a longer term, like, I'm not saying you have that same idea, but like the longer term vision would be that skiing in all its forms and snowboarding in all its forms would be able to put on an exhibit like that or a competition like that and had the same level of engagement by fans.
Yeah, look, I love the concept. I wish we had something of the scale of the US Open that drove that kind of revenue. That would certainly transform things pretty quickly for us. Look, our competitive structure is quite different than we have a World Cup season, and we don't really have those major moments, although I think we're shifting that way. I mean, for us, we had the Stiefel World Finals this year, which had the best 25 men and women in each 4 disciplines. So that was just alpine ski racing, but it was a huge success for us. I think it really captured the imagination, and for a first-year event, it was pretty mind-blowing. The good news is we've got it every other year for the next few years. So I think that's sort of proving that, for those big events, which in the US to cut through, they need to be major moments. I mean, this is the most competitive sports landscape in the world. And if you haven't got the best of the best in an event that really, really matters, it can be quite hard to attract an audience. Multiplying that by other sports as well, I think is an interesting concept. I mean, that's sort of what the Olympics does to a certain extent, all that snowboarding and skiing. And then obviously there are world championships every other year as well. The alpine calendar is packed. There are no weekends. Other sports, there is room. So I think, look, overall, I love the idea, and it's definitely a strategy for us to just elevate these big moments and make them bigger and more impactful. And we'll definitely continue down that, guys. And as it makes sense and there's opportunity to maybe converge different events, definitely open to looking at it. I mean, it's look why we talked to the X Games and the Snow League. We're now sort of piggybacking with them. Because I think one of the other practical realities, as I mentioned earlier, to put on these events is incredibly expensive. So when you can combine resources to have multiple events, it helps. Look at the track for a alpine race is very different to a moguls race. So the cost of building both of those is significant. But yeah, I hope that one day we can get there, or get to a place where we can be even more innovative with how we bring our sports together.
Yeah, just the shirt that you're wearing, and a thought that I had earlier, triggered that comment. Look, I understand there are limitations. I mean, part of the beauty of the U.S. Open tennis is that it's in New York City. You have a huge market to draw upon. That's probably where it got its start, but and it's only grown from there. It's more difficult when you have to transport people to the mountains. They're not in, generally speaking, major metro areas. Park City may be, an exception. In a decent market in Salt Lake, and say the Rockies with Denver nearby, but it's still not New York City. It's not Los Angeles. It's not the for lack of a better term, the really major metro areas. One other thing in terms of getting to the mountains and getting snow, something that impacts every one of the sports is climate, and I've had conversations with others about the impact of climate policy and how that impacts the industry. I don't know, where, again, this is where does U.S. Ski and Snowboard fit in that broader ecosystem, and you're just one small part of it. Climate doesn't impact just snow sports, obviously, but where do you see yourselves fitting in that broader discussion? Because at the end of the day, it is a threat to the product that you're putting out there, and if we don't have winter, and we don't have snow coverage, or at least low temperatures, we can't make snow, and therefore can't hold races or competitions. So how do you look at climate and the threat and the risk that it poses to the organization? I don't know how you work to mitigate that as much as possible.
Yeah, we take it very seriously, and we've really upped our game the last couple of years. We've still got a long way to go, and it's definitely got to be a joint effort. We're not waiting for perfection. Any small action can make a difference. And I think as a national governing body, we need to take a leadership role, not a sole leadership role, but we need to sort of push the boundaries. And I think, the biggest way we can help in sort of one area is around amplifying the issue and educating people on what they can do. We have significant platforms ourselves through our social channels, through our broadcasts, etc., and then our athletes who are partners with us, and a lot of them care a lot about this. So how can we use their voices and our collective channels to amplify the issue and educate people on what can be done? So that's where we see our role. We don't need to create another not-for-profit sort of climate change organization. It's working with those that exist, with POW and various others. And so we launched an initiative probably almost 3 years ago now called Easy Green. And sort of the takeaway I alluded to was actually making small changes is quite easy. Everyone almost thinks it's too big of an issue that we can't make any impact, and that's just not the case. So Easy Green is about educating folks on simple things they can be doing on a regular, if not daily basis, to mitigate climate change. Carpooling to the mountain, not using plastic bottles, reusing your equipment, things like that. And in addition to that, we're very focused on measuring our carbon footprint. Unfortunately, travel is part of what we do, but that doesn't mean we can't offset and still be more mindful about how we kind of schedule different trips. So we work with a company called Greenly to measure that really accurately. to make sure that we're offsetting through different relationships that we have, and also wherever possible using renewable energy. Solar, for example, powers our building here. Our Toyota fleet of cars is hybrid or electric. So those different kind of measures have been put in place. We talk about it a lot more regularly. We've done some different activations with different partners. It's something United, our airline partner, are very focused on, as you can imagine. POW, again, I've mentioned, we did a really cool collaboration with them and Kappa. We had branded speed suits during the World Championships for Alpine and cross country. So yeah, it's a multifaceted approach, but we've got a long way to go. We've got to up our game and we've got to continue to get creative, and we've also got to invest. I mean, we invest money back in to offset what we're spending, and not trying to be perfect, but take some concrete steps forward. Because, clearly it's affecting our sports as much as any. And it has to be reversed. Otherwise, we're going to be in dire straits.
Yeah. Don't let perfect stand in the way of the perfectly good enough.
Exactly. Well said.
Yeah. Some closing thoughts. We're in an Olympic year. Milan Cortina coming up. I'm sure that, Olympics bring a lot of spotlight and attention to the sports. How do you integrate the Olympic cycle into, I call it, the business aspects of things? Obviously, there's the planning on the sports side. Athletes are, depending upon their particular sport, maybe already qualified or will qualify in the early season races for the Olympics. But how do you look at it from an organizational level about how do you leverage the attention that the Olympics bring to, again, enhance the organization, enhance the sport, and pay dividends down the road?
Yeah, I mean, look, how lucky are we to be part of the Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games? And Paralympic for us is newer. Again, we've added back para-alpine and para-snowboard, which we're very proud of. And that just adds another element, actually extends our games period, because we have, the 2.5 weeks of the Olympics, and then we have another sort of 10 days of the Paralympics, which is awesome. So we're top of mind for even longer. I will say, look, while the Olympics is incredibly important, the World Cup season is really important too. If you ask an athlete, yes, of course they won an Olympic medal, but winning a globe really in their minds determines the best athlete across the whole season, not just a one-hit event. So for us, actually elevating those World Cup events, which is what we benefit from directly, we control those rights. That's how we can generate more revenue. They're in the US, the domestic ones at least. So I don't want to minimize the importance of the Olympics and Paralympics, but actually our World Cup season is as important in many ways. But look, there's an extra level of pressure, focus, and just attention that you get. And I think positively, we're seeing what we're calling sort of the Paris bounce. So off the back of the Paris Games, you definitely feel the momentum from the Olympics is very different to how it was in the previous few years. I think it just opened everyone's eyes to the positivity around sport. It was in a market that looked amazing on TV, that people could go to. There were crowds. We didn't have to worry about COVID, etc. And so the inbound interest, our commercial revenue has grown significantly since Paris, and it's continuing to grow leading up to Milan Cortina. NBC are as engaged as they've ever been with us. We did a promo shoot with our athletes that we've never done on the same scale before. The amount of media attention, our earned media impressions were up 700% last season. And that was going into an Olympics. So I can only imagine what they're going to be this season. So, all those things, I think, point to what you're saying, that the eyes of the world and in the US are on us, more than ever. And then with that, you obviously want to get the team primed to do as well as they can. Again, it sits in a World Cup season, so it's not like they're just focused on this. But, we've had people planning the logistical side, which is incredibly complex, especially for us in Milan Cortina, because we're at 6 different venues spread out across Italy. The Alpine venues are almost 7 hours apart, for example, where the men and women are competing almost on the same day. So we've had people dedicated to this, as well as doing their day job since March 2022. So yeah, it's all hands to the pump, and you feel the intensity and focus is obviously rising, which you would hope and you would expect. But I'm going through it for the first time. Again, I joined just before Beijing, so I'm learning as well. But yeah, it's gonna be quite a year, I think.
It should be exciting. I agree with you. Look, at the end of the day, the athletes and the true fans are going to follow the World Cup season and follow that racing, and the Olympics is just another event. Maybe not quite just another event, but you get where I'm going. But for the uninitiated, for the layperson, the people who don't know about skiing, and certainly I'll call it the wide end of the funnel, the Olympics is where they get their first taste and their first introduction to the sport. And so I guess, to be able to capitalize on that and bring them further down the path and enjoy the ride is, I think, probably important for the organization. Speaking of the athletes, and sort of finish with them perhaps, the earning potential of a ski racer is, I don't know, it depends. If you're Michaela Schifrin or Lindsey Vonn, can be pretty decent, still not LeBron James style, but okay. But for the C team athlete, they're probably struggling to make ends meet. It's not a career yet. How does the organization help the racers at that level of development sort of, build their brand, build their portfolio of offerings, and the future that they may have post ski racing?
Yeah, so I think look at it a few different ways. First of all, we're funding for the A, B, C in Alpine, and then pro and other levels in others of our sport. A sort of above development, we fully fund all of their competitive and training needs now. So that's coaching, medical, travel. In the past, at different phases, and for all teams, you had to pay a fee in addition to us funding some of it. That now has gone, which is awesome. Now, sort of the next stage is how can we help them actually make some money outside of that to support other sort of living expense. I mean, they're training, competing most of the time, so it's still most of it's covered. But they would like to have a house that they can rent or buy, or be able to go on holidays, etc. So they obviously have the right to sell certain elements of their competitive gear. They can have a sponsor on the helmet, etc. And then we provide, actually, my favorite PowerPoint slide is we have a wheel with all sorts of different spokes coming out of it. And it shows everything that we do as an organisation. Probably what we do on the snow would be more expected than what we do off the snow. What we do off the snow is unbelievable. It's more than any other organisation I've worked for. So whether that's tuition support, whether that's help and support getting internships, paid and non-paid, whether it's PR, experience and practice training, etc., whether it's how to build your brand, whether it's mental health and other support. We have about 15 different spokes on this wheel that articulate everything that an athlete can get from our organisation, and a lot of it meaningfully funded. Now almost 70% of our athletes have either graduated from further education or are studying further education, which is kind of unheard of. And we fund the majority of that for them. So we really do want to set them up for life for the reasons you mentioned. The prize money and salaries aren't what they are in the NBA. But hopefully they'll grow over time. We're working collectively with FIS, and we would like to see prize money increases. We need more money in the system to do that, otherwise it's not sustainable. But helping the athletes in their own right make as much money as they can in a way that synergizes what we're trying to do is really important. I want them to be set for life. They deserve it. They're putting their bodies on the line. They're training incredibly hard. And I really hope over time that more of them can make a significant income during their career so that they can retire in a different position.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Any closing thoughts that you wanted to offer to the listeners?
No, just really enjoyed the conversation. I think we've covered a broad variety of topics, and it's nice to be able to talk about some of these different areas, because I think It's always helpful to get feedback, but also I think just to continue to share how we look at things and our role, which we take very seriously in all the different areas that we're trying to help our athletes in sport. So thank you for the time and interest. And yeah, hopefully we get to chat further at some point.
Yes, hopefully so. It's been enjoyable, and I appreciate all the information that you've provided. And really found it interesting, and I'm sure we could go on for hours longer, but other things call. So thank you again, and look forward to speaking in the future.
Okay. Thanks, Craig. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of Fresh Corduroy. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And I want to give a thanks to Craig Zolan for the intro and outro music from his album Calder's Universe. Eric happens to be my nephew, if you couldn't guess, by the same last name. Until next time, go enjoy some fresh corduroy.